Hi everyone, today is Tuesday, October 5th, 2021, live streaming from Chicago. I'm Ben Greiner, Director of Apple Technology at Ntiva, and with me is Ross Matsuda, our Systems Administrator focused on Apple Technology. Today we are discussing how to connect your Macs to Google, Okta, or Microsoft 365, otherwise known as Azure AD, and we'll talk more about that, what that means in a minute. But first, some recent Apple news. And before I get into that, how are you, Ross?
Oh, fighting the good fight. How about yourself?
Good. I'm going with the light background today. We'll see how that works.
Yeah, it's hypnotic.
Yeah. So here, I'm going to share my screen. Something that came up recently, let's see. Something that came up on the support desk a few times is this idea of HEIC files. And I don't know if you're supposed to pronounce it. I'm not even going to try. I'm just going to say HEIC. Are you familiar with this, Ross?
I am, or loosely, I suppose I should say. If memory serves, all you had to do in there is go into the actual files, change the file type, just overwrite that HEIC to .jpeg.
Yeah, well, on the Mac, that probably works. I don't know if it works on a Windows machine.
Okay.
But yeah, Apple changed their file format for storing files on an iPhone, or really anywhere, I guess. And it stands for High Efficiency Image File. That's HEIC. And although you can set your devices to not use this format, you're kind of doing a disservice by having larger files than you need. So this is a very, as it says, high efficiency image file. Means things are smaller but better quality. And so it is nice. It's just that some applications, when sharing these files from photos, they don't know how to convert them or deal with them. So you send somebody a file format, especially on the Windows side, that they don't know how to deal with. So, and I've run into it a few times on my own computer when I just like airdrop something from an iPhone to my Mac, and I've discovered that it was this file format. And as you pointed out, Ross, you can just change the file format. It opens up. But for a Windows machine, there's an article here, and we'll post it in the notes. But it talks about how you can convert this for Windows. You know, how to convert to JPEG on Windows. So I just wanted to share that. I also wanted to mention that yesterday was Siri's 10th birthday, and I haven't wished her a belated happy birthday today to see what she says. But if you wished her happy birthday yesterday, she would say something, specific to the birthday wish. So that was kind of interesting. And today is the 10th anniversary of Steve Jobs' death. And if you go to Apple's webpage, they have a tribute to him here, and they've got a nice little film. It's only a couple minutes long. So if you're interested in that, check it out. Hard to believe it's been 10 years. Do you remember where you were, Ross, when that news was announced? Steve Jobs.
Not specifically,
yeah.
No, but I was a retail employee at the time, so I'm.
Oh, you were? Okay.
A lot going on back then, yeah.
So you worked for Apple at the time?
Yeah. I was at the Genius Bar for about 6.5 years.
Yeah.
At one of the stores.
Yeah, so I'm sure that was a huge deal at the store. I know it affected. I remember I was having dinner with my wife. We just dropped the boys off at Scouts. It was our wedding anniversary. Today is our wedding anniversary, and
happy anniversary.
Yeah, thank you. And and we all knew, I think, that it was going to happen, but Apple secrecy, no one knew exactly when, and so I remember it was a little bit of a shock. Let's see, I wanted to go to Apple Newsroom. Oh, I started the video. Can you hear the music, by the way?
Yeah, I'm not getting anything coming through here, which is
okay.
Probably for
I didn't mean to start the video. We don't need to do that. I'm going to go to Apple Newsroom. Jeez, come on. Let me move my screen sharing out of the way. Okay, here we go. Apple.com/newsroom. I just wanted to point out that Apple did update their iWork suite. And apparently, they still call it iWork, Ross. I've seen that name kind of come and go over the years, but iWork is a nice summary of a way to describe numbers, pages, Keynote, which is most equivalent to Word, Excel, and not Portfolio.
PowerPoint.
PowerPoint. Thank you, PowerPoint. And Apple updated these. Some of the new features are in preparation for Monterey, which we still don't know when Monterey is shipping, right, Ross?
Yeah, no release date yet. Beta 8's been on the ground for about a week. I haven't seen any really substantial changes in my testing there. But people are, everyone's kicking around their ideas. We're all hoping it'll be this month or next month. Just a question of when.
Yeah. And I actually really enjoy using these apps. I use them when I can, although I also live in a Windows world where I do use the Microsoft Office apps, and you can interchange them a little bit. There's translation that goes on. So it's not, I wouldn't totally recommend putting a file back and forth between, Pages and PowerPoint or Word and Pages, although it technically can be done. But I will say one of the frustrating parts for me, and I think you, Ross, is the way Apple handles these updates, especially if you use collaboration. So we have a handful of clients who use Keynote collaboration, and they love it. It works great. The problem is Apple releases an update. Of course, they don't tell us. We learn about it typically when a client calls in and says, hey, I can't collaborate on this Keynote file. And that's because one person on the team updated Keynote, and now that update has affected the collaboration. Everyone has to be on the exact same version of Keynote. Is that correct?
Close enough. So the way that this works is that, for example, a while ago, there was an update to iCloud that was pretty substantial, added a bunch of new features. And your existing iCloud account before that update went through could still hang out, still do its thing. But if you went into iCloud.com or you updated the operating system on your phone or your Mac to the newer operating system, part of that process would say, hey, great, we're going to update your iCloud ID to work with these new features. You hit OK. And as soon as you do that, that cloud information gets changed, right? And so now it's compliant with the brand new stuff Apple's put out, works great. Every other device that was looking at that information online now needs to get those OS updates or upgrades in order to talk to it. This is the same thing that's happening with Keynote. And so when one user at an organization updates to a newest version of Keynote when this stuff launches, as soon as they touch a file that's stored on the cloud, especially it's used for collaboration, that file says, oh, great, I'm working on the brand new version. That means I can enable all these features, and it writes some information into the document to support that. Well, once that's done, that's it. There's no way to really walk that back. And so anyone else who hasn't run this update yet, they touch that file, they're going to get notified that, oh, this has been edited by a user in the brand new version of Keynote. You need to update your version of Keynote in order to read it. In a vacuum, that's not a huge deal, but because Apple's pretty aggressive with the necessary operating system that needs to be installed to run some of these, that's where we see some problems. And in this situation, a lot of the features in the newest version of Keynote are Big Sur exclusives. I say Big Sur in Monterey, even though Monterey's not been launched yet. And so we're seeing some organizations that now need to get as many people as they can on their creative team who are using these collaboration documents. Everyone's got to get on Big Sur. The news is Big Sur is an incredibly mature operating system by this point. So I believe we're on version 11.6. 11.6.1 is a security update that we're expecting soon. That's currently in beta for the dev community to take a look at. So the upgrades are doable, but it can be fairly jarring to get everyone there in a rush.
Yeah. And so the general message here, and it's not just Keynote, it applies to almost all the collaboration tools out there, whether it's Box or what's another Office has collaboration tools. You really all need Adobe has collaboration tools. Everyone on your team needs to be running the same version of the software. And so before you update anything, check with your team to make sure everyone's ready for that change, because it does cause workflow disruptions. And we do our best to keep everyone up to date or at the same level, but it is a real challenge. And we also try to balance helping somebody versus locking them down to the point where they can't do some of the things that they need to do on their own. And Ross, I know you and I have talked about this. How can we prevent people from breaking their Keynote collaboration other than locking them out of the App Store, and or Apple fixing it, like putting up a screen saying, "Hey, but are you sure you want to do this before you take the next step?" So we'll keep working on that. Let's see. Okay, so let's get to our main topic. 10 minutes in. So our main topic is really about Adigy, or no, not Adigy. Yes, Adigy. Well, it's about identity management, and specifically Adigy identity. And I clearly am going to struggle with these words today. So let me share another screen I have, which is the Keynote. And I'm going to put Keynote into a window, which works much better. That's one of the relatively new features. And then I'm going to share that window here, Keynote. Okay, you see the Apple and Ntiva logo, Ross?
Yep, look good.
Okay. And now you see a Mac, actually a Mac M1 representation, or at least taken online. And Apple got rid of their Apple logo from the front, so it's hard to even know that is an Apple these days, which is surprising. But this is your standard Mac OS login screen if you're running Big Sur, and typically you'd have your own login. Here's mine. You'd have Ntiva's login. That's our administrative login. You may have others. There may be others specific to your client login. You may have a client admin login. But this is a general representation of what it looks like. And with Adigy Identity, what we're talking about is replacing that screen with your identity management provider. And a lot of people don't know if they even have an identity management provider, but those that run either Google or Office 365 do have one because it ships with those solutions. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but the general concept is, instead of sending your employees to log into their machines using their Mac username and password, they're going to log in using their email and password, and maybe even two-factor, that they use to log in to their primary service for email, which in this case, in this screen grab, is Office 365. So let's see, let me get to the next slide. So I talked about the way this works. Microsoft 365, which really relies on Azure Active Directory, which is different than Active Directory. Active Directory is a long-standing directory service that has been around for decades, is mostly on-premise. In fact, I don't think there really is a off-premise Active Directory server. I mean, service.
And no,
I guess you,
not to the best of my knowledge.
Okay.
You're going to be running on a local server at one of your offices if you're connecting to AD.
So Azure is the sort of cloud next generation version of Active Directory. And then Google Workspace has their own directory. And Okta is a more of a identity provider that is built for the cloud, that spans, you know, all services, all devices. And it's also very popular if you do have a need that goes beyond Azure Active Directory or Google Workspace. So we have clients using Okta, or Jump Cloud is another one. One login would be a third, as an example. And there are pros and cons to, and reasons why people would use different solutions. And in fact, we have used Microsoft Office 365. I think it's just called Microsoft 365 now. It was Office 365, now it's Microsoft 365. We've used that for years, even before we joined Ntiva. When we were Forget Computers, we were using it. And we tried using Azure Active Directory as our directory. And at the time, it was both frustrating, and honestly, we didn't have the knowledge to take full advantage of it. So we ended up using Jump Cloud. Actually, we used one login, then we used Jump Cloud. But now that we're part of Ntiva and they have the deep resources in Microsoft 365, they have people who know Azure Active Directory. And I think it's gotten a little easier as well. So it's more closely tied, or I feel we're using it much more than we did One Login or Jump Cloud in the past. All that being said, most everyone has a identity management provider, whether they know it or not, or they could take more advantage of something like Okta or their existing solutions. In this presentation, we want to just focus on AD identity. So let's take a look at how that works. And the basic concept is we take your cloud directory, we tie it to AD, and then AD replaces your login screen. And you can see we have our we have our Ntiva logo in this screen. Everything else is provided by Microsoft. And if I were to log into this, these are screen grabs, obviously, but if I were to log into this, I would enter my email, I'd enter my password. Oh, I want to mention you can also brand not just the logo, but you can brand the background as well if you want to have a corporate color or something. Or you can put your corporate logos in there, or whatever you fancy. Here, I threw some nice bunnies and squirrels and hearts in here, just for fun.
Bold choice.
Yeah, and this can identify that this is your. I know we have a lot of clients who love branding and identifying, or they're branding experts. So they'll brand the background, and we can provide the dimensions. You send them to us, we'll put them in the system, and you can have your own logo and your own background. We're not going to make Ross do that work. You have to provide the images. We're only going to provide the dimensions and the specs.
That's very kind of you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So if I were logging in here, the one thing that would be unique to our situation is we also use Duo for two-factor authentication when logging into Office 365. So if I were to log into my Mac, I would be presented with this screen where I enter my email address, I enter my password, and then eventually I'm prompted for the Duo authentication. And there's some options there, and I can accept it on my watch or my phone. But that is the integration, and that's what it looks like when logging into your Mac. We'll talk about some pros and cons of that later, but that is the concept of how it works. And Adigy has a video that they have on their website, and it's only a minute, and it goes through. In fact, while we're talking here, I'll just I'll play it. I think I can play it. Ross, tell me, is it playing?
It is playing.
Do you hear music or not? Probably not.
No, still no system audio.
Yeah, okay. It's just background music anyway. So they're showing, and I have to talk over the music, sorry. But they're showing Microsoft login in real time. And in this case, the two-factor is a text. They're showing Okta authentication. I've not used Okta, but concepts are the same. And they talk about just-in-time account creation and what that means just in time. And I don't think that I'm going to pause it here for a minute because I don't think the video represents what just-in-time is. Just-in-time is the idea that you can take a Mac that typically out of the box, but it could already be out of the box and connected to the internet. And if you sit down at that Mac that is tied to Active Directory and tied to your directory, and you have an account on that directory, even if you've never had an account on that machine, it will create one for you just in time, right? So if Ross sat down at my machine and typed in his credentials at the Adigy identity login screen, which would be Microsoft login screen, Adigy identity would create an account for Ross on my computer at that time, just in time. Did I get that right, Ross?
Yeah, spot on. It really just mimics if you've been used to using a local Active Directory setup. It's the same basic idea, right? Where you can sit in front of a machine you've never been to before, especially if you're an IT or an administrator, you've got a way to get into that computer, right? It's you type in your network credentials, and it'll spin up an account for you to use, keeping your data, separated from everyone else's. One wonderful thing to note about this, especially when users are adding Adigy identity when they're already in production, right? So for computers that you've had for years and people are using them, as soon as you turn on identity, when you log in for the first time, if it sees that there's some user accounts already on the Mac, it'll give you the option to connect your online identity with one of the local accounts. And that way it'll know that, oh, when this person signs in, go to this home folder, and it'll also sync up your your login password to match the one from your identity provider. It's a great quality of life feature.
Yeah, that's super important. And I think we'll talk a little bit about that at the end, some of the rollout features. Let me go back to this video because I did want to just finish it. Let's see. Let's go back to Okta, just in time. Okay, so it does the just in time. And then I think it does another demonstration. Yeah, multi-factor authentication, showing Okta. We've got the Mac on the left. We've got an iPhone on the right, where in this case, the iPhone is going to produce the two-factor that we feed into the Mac. Local login. So if for any reason you want to bypass this and go straight into the local login, you have the option to do that if we make it available to you. Synchronization, if you change your passcode on your identity provider at Office, at Google, at Okta, it forces you to sync up here locally. And then you also have some options for network connections and reverting back to the Mac OS login. So user authentication simplified, that's really the goal here. Simplify instead of giving your employees another set of credentials that they need to remember, give them one set of credentials that they can use in the cloud and on their computer. And I know this is challenging. In fact, we just had a call over the weekend. One of our clients could not log into their Mac. And turns out this client had recently connected their Macs to their cloud directory. And the person trying to log in was using their old Mac credentials. This is the one time where they actually remembered their Mac credentials, but it wasn't correct. They needed their cloud credentials. They needed their email credentials. And once they were reminded of that, oh yes, thank you, they were able to get in. So there are some habits we have to break, and none of this is foolproof. But in fact, let's talk about, in summary, we have a few more minutes left. In summary, what is this? And this is really, Ross, I don't know if you want to add to this, but it's really, in my view, a way to simplify employee logins and standardize things.
Yeah.
Would you add to that?
I think that's huge. It allows you to simplify the onboarding process. So new Mac comes out of the box. User doesn't
out of the
create
box.
A separate local account. They can just log into the computer with their email account, makes new account for them, done. For existing users, it allows them to have their passwords link up and make it so if their password, worst case scenario is ever compromised, they only have to change it in one place, and then that one change will affect their workstation as well, or any other things that are connected to that identity provider. That's probably the biggest, the most important gain that we get from identity.
Which also means if you needed to, for any reason, lock someone out of their computer, although there are ways through MDM to lock a computer, you could also technically change their passcode in the cloud, and then when they tried to log in, if they didn't know that passcode, they would not be able to log into their computer.
Spot on.
Yep. Okay, so who needs it? I would say any organization that has at least 10 employees or more could benefit from this, and 10 is just a kind of an arbitrary number. But certainly anyone who is running Microsoft 365 or Google, we know you can take advantage of it. If you're using Okta, we know you can take advantage of it. If you're using something else, contact us and we can talk about if it's an option for you. Anything else to add there, Ross?
No, I just think it's a great feature set if it's something that jives with your company culture.
Yeah, for sure. And why do we need it? We talked about simplification. There's another aspect to it, and that is security. And there are ways that you can not just enforce the two-factor like we showed you, but you can actually require that. And when I say require it, when you provide two-factor authentication like we showed in the demos, but you give people the ability to also bypass that and turn to a local account, which they also showed in the videos, you're kind of I wouldn't say cheating, but you're not enforcing two-factor, meaning if someone understands how this works, full disclosure, we're always about full disclosure. If someone understands how this works and they don't want to use two-factor and you give them the ability to bypass that, then they can certainly do that. Now, you can still change the passcode, and if you don't give it to them, they're not going to be able to log in, but they could bypass two-factor. So if you are super concerned about security, and there are other ways to secure Apple devices, like this, it's always a defense in depth, right? Layers of protection. So this is just one layer out of many that you should have. But if you said, well, we have to be super secure, we have to require two-factor, then there is a way to not allow anyone to bypass that. And that sounds awesome. That sounds super secure, right, Ross? But there is a disadvantage, and I'll let you talk about the disadvantage.
So the reason that Adigy included those two bypasses, one that allows you to pick a list of users, just local accounts straight in the Adigy identity window, the other one to just exit Adigy identity and go straight to the normal login window, is for if your computer's offline. If you're on a plane that doesn't have service, and if you're traveling and you're just in a place where you don't have internet connectivity, your computer crashes, or you have another need to restart. If you can't reach your identity provider, you need another way to get to the computer. At this time, I've been in communication with Adigy, just kicking around ideas for ways to tighten this up a little bit more. But for the time being, if we turn off all of the alternate options, if we turn off that local login list, if we turn off the ability to exit identity to get to the default login screen, if your computer is offline and can't speak to the identity provider, you can't log into it. It's definitely a more drastic measure, but for situations where you have really high security compliance requirements, it can be a powerful tool. And so it's an option. Know that it can be done.
And in that situation, it means that you're not going to work on that computer until you get back onto the internet and can validate that you're the right person who should be on that computer. So yeah, certainly powerful. And where do we get Adigy identity? So you need to be running Adigy. If you're a client of ours, especially legacy Forget Computers, you're already running Adigy, so we can set you up with Adigy identity. If you're an Ntiva client, we need to get you into the new system being Adigy. So I know we're working on that. We haven't completed it yet, but we're trying to get to all the Ntiva clients and get them into the new system so that we can give them additional benefits like this. So if you want to get started on this, let us know. And how do we make it work? Ross touched on this earlier, but a Mac out of the box, super easy. You break the shrink wrap. You're using Apple Zero Touch workflow. You take it out of the box. You need to connect it to the internet. There's no way around that. Once again, it's got to be connected to the internet to have that conversation with the mobile device management solution and Adigy identity and Office or Google to make all this work. Now, if you're in the field, meaning you already have devices in the field, a choice has to be made. It can certainly happen, and we did it with our own team. In fact, we did it twice in the past couple of years. We were running the beta, and then when we moved from Forget Computers to Ntiva, we had to make a change. Anyway, the point is, if you already have devices out in the field, there is a method by which you can log in and sync in those accounts, meaning take your cloud account and your local account and synchronize them and make them the same. Now you're logging in with one set of credentials using Adigy identity. I will say there is a little bit of a challenge because even though it works, it is possible for somebody to click the wrong option and essentially create another account on their computer, right? There's just no way around that. Like, they have to follow the instructions, and if they don't, they're going to create a brand new, fresh account that will work. It's just they'll wonder where all their stuff is, right? Because they just created a brand new account. And there's a way to recover from that. But the point is communication. If you want to make this work in the field, you've got to communicate how to do it, when to do it, and of course we're there to support you, but we need to work with you to make that happen. And I wanted to mention as well, or maybe it applies more to the last one. When do we deploy it? We were just having a conversation, Ross and I, about when to deploy something. And it kind of came up that maybe we could deploy this when we move to Monterey. But Ross, you had a very good point, is, anytime you're making changes in change management, you want to kind of reduce the amount of change. So if something happens, you know why it happened. And so we were talking about how it's probably not a good idea to deploy this when you're making another change, because even though we've had no issues with this, people tend to associate problems together. And maybe, if you did associate this with a new operating system and you had an issue with that operating system, people might blame it on Adigy identity, and then they don't trust Adigy identity, even though technically it's not related. There's no reason for them to be upset in that way. It's just natural that we would do that. So I like the idea, and I'm glad you mentioned it, Ross, that if you're going to deploy this, deploy it as it's a standalone project. I think you do want to be on, you don't have to be on Big Sur, do you, Ross? But you have to.
No, I believe this works in Catalina and later.
Okay.
But it's, on that note, I would certainly recommend you operate out of Mojave. So if you're running on any 1014 computers, we will politely recommend that those get upgraded to Catalina or Big Sur before we proceed.
Yeah, so really you should be on Big Sur. And if you're not, let us help you get there. And if you want to roll out Adigy identity, let's focus on that as a project to make sure that it's working for you and everyone's happy with it and understands it before you move on to something else like an OS upgrade. Okay, so that's Adigy identity. And I want to mention, I'm going to stop sharing again. I want to mention that we're going to have a complimentary blog post to go with this, and it's going to be posted next Tuesday. So I think the idea is we're going to do live stream this week, follow up blog post the following week, and then we'll keep alternating in that way. So look for that. And I'm going to share my screen one more time just to close out with, if you go to Ntiva.com, under Apple for Business live streams, we do now have upcoming live streams. We've got a schedule. So this is the one today. Our next one will be about distributing apps to your team, unless we have to bump any one of these to talk about Monterey. If Monterey surprises us, we may bump these, but we're going to be talking about that. And we also have past live streams. We've now completed the past live streams. It was previously going to YouTube. Now it's going here, where you can see more details, you can watch them, and you can see the transcript and search the transcript. So I think that's a lot more useful. Thank you, Holly and Corey, for making that happen. And I thought I have one more note. A blog post. Yeah, that was pretty much it. I did want to mention one thing, but maybe we'll save it for later. Yeah, we'll do it next time. So we'll see you in 2 weeks. Ross, anything else you want to add before I cut us off?
No, that sounds great. Like Ben said, reach out if you have any questions about identity management. We're happy to assess where you're at and maybe see what we can help you build.
Oh, I did have, I'm going to add one more thing. It was the question I wanted to address was in Adigy identity, there's one thing to be aware of. You do have to log in twice. And that throws people a bit at first. That's if your computer's encrypted. So if your computer's encrypted, which we strongly recommend, you have to unlock, decrypt the hard drive before you can get to the login screen. And currently, Apple does not provide a way for the integration of a third party to happen at the level of File Vault. So small price to pay for the additional streamline of the process and security, but it is something to note. You will have to log in twice, as opposed to today. If you decrypt your hard drive at File Vault and you're not talking to any third-party identity provider, Apple will pass off those login credentials and dump you into the Finder. Correct, Ross?
Yep, spot on.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay, cool. And that's all we got. See you in 2 weeks. Thanks, everyone. Bye.